In the next example, we are going to see a really simple graphical user interface assembly program. It is called bananas.asm. Let's begin by first looking at what this program does, and only then we will look at the source code. We first assemble this program. However, this time we don't need the console to run this program. We can just click. And this is what we get. A message which says, "Welcome to this program." Let's click OK. Next we get another message, which this time is a question. It says, "Do you like bananas?" Well, there are two options, yes or no. Let's try the no. We get back a disappointed message, which says, "So disappointing." Don't be sad. Let's try again. Again we have this message, "Welcome to this program." We click OK. Next we have the question, "Do you like bananas?" Let's try the other option this time, yes. And this time, excited message, "Bring on the bananas." The title is yes. After all this excitement about the bananas, let's take a look at the source code. Maybe the first thing to note about this code is this line. Format PE GUI 4.0. I remind you that usually we have here format PE console. However, this time we don't use the console. Therefore, we specify that this is a graphical user interface program of version 4.0. Basically, every graphical user interface program that you are going to write of 32 bits mode is going to have this line. Format PE GUI 4.0. This version, by the way, is of the PE file, not of your program or something like this. Let's continue to the import section. The iData section is the import section in this program. We can see that this program is linked to two different modules. The first one is called kernel32.dll and the next one is called user32.dll, which is new. We haven't used this module yet. Next we specify which functions we are going to use from every module. From the kernel32 module, we are going to use the exit process function. From the user32 module, we are going to use a different function, the messagebox.a function. This is a function which we haven't seen before. Note that it ends with the A suffix, which means that this is the ASCII version of this function. It also has a Unicode version, which ends with W. In this program, we are going to use the ASCII version of this function. Let's continue to the data section. In the data section, we can see all the messages that we have previously seen when we ran this program. There is the welcome message, the question message, and then the two messages for the yes and no options. Note that every message has both body and title. Let me show you the program for a moment. Here we can see that this is the body, this part, and the title is here on the top. Let's continue to the code section. It seems like basically everything that we have here is just calls to message box A. First we call message box A with the welcome message. We can see that we specify welcome body and welcome title, which are just those two strings. Let's go over the arguments shortly. The first argument is called HWND, which is the handle to the owner window. In this case, we don't really have any windows, so we just supply 0, which means that we don't want to specify any owner window. Next we have the LP text argument, which is really the body of the message. Next we have the LP caption argument, which is really the title of the message. Finally we have the last argument called type. This argument specifies basically how the message box is going to look like. If we compare for a moment the first message box call and the second one, we can see the difference in this argument. In the first message box, it has this value, MB OK or MB icon information. However, in the second one, it has the value MB yes no or MB icon question. We are going to get to this argument a bit later, but for now we just have to understand that this argument determines how the message box looks like. Another interesting thing to note is that we actually get a result from the second message box, which presents a question to the user. The result, as expected, is inside EAX. We can see here that we compare EAX with the value ID yes, which is some constant. Then we jump accordingly. If we did got the yes value, we are going to jump to this label, which is called like bananas. At this point, we are going to invoke this call to the message box, which is going to show a happy message. On the other hand, if the result was not yes, we are going to be here, where we show a disappointed message box to the user. Finally, to make sure that we don't accidentally show both of those messages, we have this jump here, which jumps to the end of the program and skips the happy message. Let's check the message box function at MSDN. First we open the MSDN website, and next we search for message box. Note that we do not search for message box A. That is because message box A is just one of the names of the message box function. I remind you that it has two names, message box A for ASCII and message box W for Unicode. Now let's search. We pick the first result, messagebox function. And this is what we get. The general description of this function is as follows. Displays a modal dialog box that contains a system icon, and so on. Let's take a look at the syntax of this function. It contains 4 arguments, just like in our program. Let's see the description of those arguments. HWND is a handle to the owner window. LP text is the message to be displayed. LP caption is the dialog box title. And finally, utype is the really interesting argument. It contains lots of options. As it says here, this parameter can be a combination of flags from the following groups of flags, which means that basically this argument, which is called type, is made of different flags. It is of size exactly 1 dword, and we use every bit of this dword as some kind of flag. Sometimes we use even more than 1 bit at a time. Let me show you the description of the utype argument at MSDN. To indicate the buttons displayed in the message box, we can pick one of the following values. As an example, in our first message box, we picked MBOK, and we combined it with another flag called MB icon information. We can see that the other option, MB icon information, shows up here. Note that we can combine those 2 values into one combined type. This constant is of value 40 in base 16, while MBOK has the value 0. Basically, MBOK corresponds to the lower nibble, the lower 4 bits. However, MB icon information corresponds to the next bits. Therefore, they do not overlap, and the message box function is able to decompose the different options which we have combined into the type argument. Let's continue a bit. The next section that I want to discuss is the return value section. I remind you that we checked the return value from the question message box, the message box that contained the 2 buttons, yes and no. It is specified here that this function does have a return value of type integer. We can see here a table of the different possible values. The value that we have checked is IDS, which equals 6. In this line in our code, we compared the return value with IDS to check if the user has clicked the yes button. As usual, you might be wondering, where do these constants come from? Let me show you where you can find those constants. As usual, the answer is that those constants are inside this include file, win32a.inc. And maybe more specifically, Let me show you how to find one of those constants, just for example. Maybe we are going to find MB yes no. On the left, we can see the folder where I installed FASM. It is called FASMW. We get into the include folder and then into the equates folder, where we pick user32.inc. I pick this file because the function messagebox.a comes from the module user32. Therefore, user32 would be a good place to search. I open this file, which contains many definitions, mostly definitions that relate to the user32 module. Now I just have to search for MB yes no. And I find it here. It says that it is of value 4. We can also see here many other options for the type argument of the messagebox function. If we search the MSDN page for MB yes no, we are also going to find that it has the value 4, just like as defined in the FASM include file of user32.inc. Let's summarize this lesson. This program was the first graphical user interface program which we have seen written in assembly language. It had a different format, which is called Format PE GUI, Graphical User Interface. This program uses the messagebox function to display messages to the user, and also display different options to the user, from which the user can choose an option. Messagebox is one of the simplest graphical user interface functions in the Windows API. Also, maybe as a conclusion from this program, it might be true that it is better to like bananas than not like bananas. See you on the next lesson.